Welcome to the Razors Inc. podcast with your host, Jonathan Farini. A couple of weeks ago, we devoted a podcast to the talented Mr. Ripley, a story of class envy, identity, sexual identity, and of course, murder. But nearly 50 years earlier, another movie was a sort of precursor to the talented Mr. Ripley, and it turns out it's not coincidence. So pour yourself a drink, pull up a chair, and hear Jonathan's take on movies, television, and today, what happens when ordinary people get drawn into morally compromising positions. Here's your host, Jonathan Farini.
Why does the movie Strangers on a Train seem so weird? I'm recording this in 2026. I've been watching it for decades and decades. But today I want to talk about one of Alfred Hitchcock's strangest films. Not necessarily his greatest film, not necessarily his most famous film, but in my opinion, one of his most psychologically unsettling films. It's the 1951 thriller Strangers on a Train. And the question I want to ask is this: why does this movie feel so weird, at least to me? It's not bad, not outdated, not merely suspenseful. It's weird. Why does it still feel psychologically uncomfortable more than 70 years later? Why does it carry this strange emotional vibration underneath the murder plot? Why does the relationship between the two men feel charged in ways the film never openly explains? And why do modern audiences in 2026 still respond to it so strangely? I hope there are others out there that feel the same way I do. Maybe I'm speaking for myself, but you'll still find this interesting. To understand that, I think we have to begin not with Hitchcock, but begin with the author of the original novel, Patricia Highsmith. Patricia Highsmith published the novel Strangers on a Train in 1950, and Highsmith was not an ordinary crime writer. She specialized in psychological contamination. Use that word specifically. You'll find out why in a minute. Her stories are rarely about heroes and villains in the traditional sense. They're about identity, obsession, hidden desire, moral infection, and envy, and emotional dependency. Check this out. Her most famous later creation, you all know it, would be Tom Ripley from The Talented Mr. Ripley, one of literature's great charming sociopaths. And here's the fascinating thing, I believe. Bruno Anthony in Strangers on a Train feels eerily like a prototype of Tom Ripley. Not exactly the same man, but emotionally similar.
I beg your pardon. Aren't you Guy Haynes? Oh, sure. I saw you blast Faraday right off the court in South Orange last season. Made the semifinals, didn't you? Yeah. Oh, I certainly admire people who do things. By the way, my name is Bruno. Bruno Anthony. See? Well, I suppose you think it's corny, but my mother gave it to me, so I have to wear it to please her. How do you do?
Bruno fixates on Guy Haynes the way Tom Ripley later fixates on Dickie Greenleaf. It's not simply friendship. It's not simply admiration. It's not simply envy. It's something much stranger. It's possession, longing, identity, hunger. Bruno doesn't just want Guy's friendship. Come on. He wants access to Guy's life. He wants emotional intimacy. He wants a secret bond, so to speak. He wants Guy tied to him forever through complicity and murder. And that emotional current is one of the reasons the film feels so modern and weird. Now, let's talk about the basic production for a minute. Strangers on a Train was released in 1951 by Warner Brothers. It was directed and produced by Alfred Hitchcock and starred Farley Granger as Guy Haynes and Robert Walker as Bruno Anthony. The premise is one of the greatest high-concept ideas in film history. Simple. Two strangers meet on a train. Big deal. This guy named Bruno, whose tie says Bruno, recognizes Guy as a tennis player and begins talking to him.
Want to hear one of my ideas for a perfect murder? You want to hear the busted light socket in the bathroom or the carbon monoxide in the garage?
Neither one. I may be old-fashioned, but I thought murder was against the law.
What is a life for two guys? Some people are better off dead. Like your wife and my father, for instance. Now, Let's say that you'd like to get rid of your wife.
It's a morbid thought.
No. Just suppose. Let's say that you had a very good reason. Now, you'd be afraid to kill her. You know why? You'd get caught. And what would trip you up? The motive. Ah, now, here's my idea.
I'm afraid I haven't got time to listen, Brooks.
Listen, it's so simple, too. Two fellows meet accidentally, like you and me. No connection between them at all. Never saw each other before. Each one has somebody that he'd like to get rid of. So, they swap murders.
Swap murders?
Each fellow does the other fellow's murder. Then there's nothing to connect them. Each one has murdered a total stranger. Like, you do my murder, I do yours.
Guy thinks this is merely the fantasy of a rich eccentric. Bruno does not. Now, I just ask you as a writer, or as anybody, as a filmgoer, would you really have a conversation with a stranger in any environment? Train, car, plane, social media? I don't think so. This is a hard one to pull off, but he did. And from that moment forward, the film becomes less about murder and more about psychological invasion. You see, appropriately enough, Hitchcock himself quietly boards this psychological nightmare early in the film in one of his most memorable cameos. Please see my podcast, Directors in the Frame, where I talked about director cameos, and Hitchcock is at the top of the list. About 11 minutes into the movie, Hitchcock appears boarding the train carrying a large double bass or cello case. It's brief, funny, slightly ridiculous, and unmistakably Hitchcock. But, it's also strangely symbolic. Because the entire film, in my opinion, is about emotional baggage, hidden burdens, and dangerous psychological exchanges. And here is Alfred Hitchcock lugging this enormous instrument case aboard the train, almost as if he is personally carrying the weight of the story into the compartment with the audience. Get it? Hitchcock loved these cameos because audiences began hunting for him in every movie. It's schlocky to me, but it's Alfred Hitchcock. But in Strangers on a Train, the cameo feels especially fitting because the train itself is symbolic. It's a protagonist. There's chance encounters, crossed destinies, strangers trapped together in intimate proximity. And today we don't have those train compartments, but if you look at it, you can get an idea about the proximity and how intimate that could be, and how bizarre this conversation with a complete stranger becomes, and how unlikely from a writer's perspective, I think, it would be. Let's move on. Hitchcock is almost saying, I'm the conductor of this madness. Boy, you are, Alfred. Now, here's where things become especially interesting. The screenplay history of Strangers on a Train was very chaotic. One of the writers brought onto the project was the legendary noir novelist Raymond Chandler, author of The Big Sleep and the creator of Philip Marlowe. But Chandler and Hitchcock despised working together. Chandler thought Hitchcock's story conferences were exhausting and vague. Hitchcock thought Chandler was rigid, difficult, and combative. Chandler reportedly mocked Hitchcock's methods, while Hitchcock later implied Chandler could not adapt to collaborative filmmaking. I don't know. Raymond Chandler was one hell of a writer. Something else was going on between those two. Eventually, the partnership collapsed, and this is one of the great hidden stories behind the film. Much of the screenplay was ultimately shaped by a relatively unknown woman named Cesne Ormandy. Cesne had been an assistant to the legendary screenwriter Ben Hecht. Hitchcock turned to her after the Chandler relationship deteriorated. Along with Hitchcock's wife Alma Reville and others, Ormandy helped reshape the screenplay into the final film audiences know today. Ironically, Raymond Chandler received major screen credit, even though much of his actual work was either revised heavily or discarded. I'm sorry, Raymond. Now, here's where the film diverges sharply from Patricia Highsmith's novel. And let me say this. Patricia Highsmith would have been one very interesting writer to have a conversation with when you look at this film and you look at Tom Ripley. In the novel, Guy Haines is much darker. He eventually agrees to the reciprocal murder and kills Bruno's father. That's critical. The novel's morally corrosive. You see, Highsmith's version suggests that ordinary people contain darkness waiting to emerge under pressure. Maybe she's right. Guy becomes psychologically trapped not because Bruno manipulates him, but because Bruno awakens impulses already inside him. But Hitchcock changed that in the film. Guy remains comparatively innocent. He never commits the second murder. Bruno becomes the clear psychopath.
Hello. Guy.
Bruno. What? Now, who did you say this is?
Bruno, Guy. Bruno Anthony. Don't you remember? On the train. Are you getting a divorce? Oh, so she double-crossed you. Are you going to see her again?
The movie transforms from existential psychological doom into suspense entertainment. So we have to ask why. Well, it was censorship of the time. Remember, it's 1951 America under the production code, and Hollywood morality rules made it extremely difficult for a mainstream leading man to commit murder and remain sympathetic. But Hitchcock also understood audience psychology. Audiences needed someone to root for, see? So the movie becomes less morally bleak than Highsmith's novel, but it retains the psychological tension underneath. And this is where we arrive at the question people still debate today. Was Strangers on a Train a gay film? Well, there's different opinions. I believe the answer is not openly, but unmistakably coded inside the film. The homoerotic tension between Bruno and Guy is impossible to ignore once you see it, particularly from the perspective of 2026, unless you've been living in a cave somewhere. Bruno invades Guy's space immediately. He flirts psychologically. He studies him. He flatters him. He becomes obsessed with him. He wants a private relationship with Guy built on secrecy.
Hello, Guy.
What are you doing here at this time of night?
Well, you don't seem very pleased to see me. I brought you a little present.
What do you mean?
Recognize them? She wasn't hurt in any way. It was all over in no time. I knew you'd be surprised. And, Guy, there's nothing for us to worry about. Nobody saw me. Only Miriam. And I was very careful, Guy. Even when I dropped your cigarette lighter there, I went back to pick it up.
This is important. The erotic charge of the film isn't sex. It's the secrecy, the forbidden intimacy, complicity. You see, Bruno behaves almost like a rejected lover long before there is any crime at all. You see it, you feel it when you watch this character. Now, let's add another layer. Farley Granger himself, the actor playing Guy, was bisexual and later openly discussed relationships with both men and women in his memoirs. That does not mean the film is autobiographical, but it does add another fascinating layer to the atmosphere of the movie. The film's queerness lives not in explicit statements, but in implication. You know, the glances, the fixation, the emotional dependence, the coded language, the intimacy between men that cannot openly declare itself. And Hitchcock was a master at this kind of implication. He understood how to smuggle taboo emotions into mainstream entertainment through visual storytelling. Tennessee Williams, I would love to have you chime in right now. One of the most famous examples is the tennis scene. Everyone in the audience moves their head back and forth following the tennis ball, except Bruno. Bruno stares directly at Guy without moving. Some might find it funny. I found it disturbing. I found it erotic and threatening. In one image, Hitchcock tells us everything, doesn't he? Society watches the game, but Bruno's watching the man, Guy. This is why the film feels strange to me. It's carrying emotional material it cannot openly speak. And Hitchcock's visual genius amplifies this constantly. The film opens with shoes crossing paths before we even see the faces. Check it out. One pair conservative, one pair flamboyant. Already, Hitchcock's telling us the stories about doubles or something more. Secret selves, opposites. Guy's the respectable public man. He's an athlete, future politician. He represents clean cut American success. But Bruno is a shadow self. He's wealthy, idle, theatrical, mother fixated.
Now, you haven't been doing anything foolish. Well, I do hope you've forgotten all about that silly little plan of yours.
Which one?
About blowing up the White House.
Oh, Ma, I was only fooling. Besides, what would the president say?
You're a naughty boy, Bruno. Well, you can always make me laugh.
Hint, decadent, socially inappropriate, and dangerously emotional. See, Bruno understands something horrifying. Guy secretly wants his wife gone. Guy would never act on it, but Bruno acts for him. That is the film's terrifying idea. What if someone else acted on your darkest private wish? Think about it. Really, think about it. That concept still feels modern in 2026, and even more so. Today, the mechanism might not be a train. It might be social media, text messages, screenshots, online obsessions. But the underlying fear remains exactly the same. What happens when a stranger sees something hidden inside you and decides to make it real? That is timeless. And then there's Robert Walker's extraordinary performance as Bruno. This may be one of the greatest villain performances Hitchcock ever captured because Bruno is charming, he's funny, he's elegant.
You're going to do a murder. How are you going to do it? That's the fascinating part. How are you going to do it? I didn't get your name.
Mrs. Cunningham.
Mrs. Cunningham. How are you going to do it?
Well, I suppose I'll have to get a gun from somewhere.
Oh, no, Mrs. Cunningham. Bang, bang, bang all over the place. Blood everywhere.
How about a little poison?
Oh, that's better. That's better, Mrs.
Anderson.
Oh, that's better, Mrs. Anderson. But you see, Mrs. Cunningham's in a dreadful hurry. Poison could take anywhere from 10 to 12 weeks if poor Mr. Cunningham is going to die from natural causes. Oh, no, no, no. I have the best way and the best tools. Simple, silent, and quick. The silent part being the most important. Let me show you what I mean. You don't mind if I borrow your neck for a moment, do you?
And that's dangerous storytelling for 1951. The villain is more magnetic than the hero. Yeah, check it out. See for yourself. Farley Granger intentionally plays Guy as passive and anxious. Guy retreats while Bruno advances. Guy hesitates while Bruno acts. Bruno dominates every room he enters because he's emotionally uninhibited. And again, this connects directly to Patricia Highsmith's later creation, Tom Ripley. Think about it. Tom Ripley also wants entry into another man's world. Dickie Greenleaf represents beauty, class, leisure, acceptance, masculinity, freedom. Ripley's fascination becomes obsession, remember? And Bruno Anthony feels like an early sketch of that same emotional architecture. The outsider who becomes fixated on another man's life, another man's identity, another man's acceptance. But it's not merely sexual desire, it's something more complicated, in my opinion. It's a hunger to merge, and Patricia Highsmith specialized in that emotional ambiguity. Her characters often do not fully understand themselves. See, desire emerges sideways in her characters. through imitation, obsession, manipulation, through crime. That ambiguity is precisely why Strangers on a Train still feels psychologically dangerous. Modern audiences, let's face it, are more fluent in 2026 at recognizes coded queer subtext than audiences in 1951. What Hitchcock had to imply through glances and atmosphere, viewers today immediately detect. Now, visually, Hitchcock elevated the material far beyond kind of a pulp fiction. The murder was reflected in eyeglasses. Remember when she was being strangled? The cigarette lighter becomes evidence and obsession. The runaway carousel climax, the amusement park transforming from childlike fantasy into a nightmare. See, these are Hitchcock inventions, cinematic symbolism layered onto Highsmith's psychological foundation. And perhaps that's the final reason the movie remains so alluring. It's noir thriller, carrying forbidden emotional currents underneath its polished Hollywood surface. And beneath everything lies one terrifying question. Not who committed murder, but what private thought inside you made the murder possible? That was daring in 1951. It remains daring today. And maybe that is why Strangers on a Train still feels weird, at least to me. Because underneath the suspense, underneath the witty dialogue, underneath the glamorous black and white cinematography, the movie really is about emotional trespassing, about one human being crossing into another person's hidden psychological territory. And once Bruno steps into Guy's life, he never truly leaves it. Not even when the movie ends. There's only one film that I would recommend is the most appropriate bookend to Strangers on a Train, because this movie also makes me feel weird. And guess what? It was also directed by Hitchcock just 3 years earlier in 1948. It's called Rope. Stars James Stewart, who, if you watch his performance, my take is he's clearly uncomfortable playing this role. Our friend Farley Granger shows up again, and another young actor, John Dahl. What's it about? Well, it's about two intellectually arrogant former students who murder a classmate. These are upper class kids living the good life, and they murder him simply to prove they can commit the perfect crime. And then they host a dinner party in this lavish apartment, the same apartment where the body's hidden inside a chest. James Stewart slowly grows suspicious. They're in fact trying to impress Stewart. And there's a theme there, which I'm going to get to in a minute. It's the perfect bookend to Strangers on a Train because both films revolve around this idea of dangerously intimate male relationships, where there's psychological seduction, homoerotic tension, manipulation, and this thrill of transgression.
I'll ask you. What do you suspect? Oh, I've forgotten. Where's David, Philip?
I don't know. Why?
Brandon knows.
Does he?
Doesn't he?
Not that I know.
Oh, come now.
I don't. Why don't you ask Brandon?
I have. But he's too busy maneuvering the other 2 points of the triangle. What for, Philip? Just what is Brandon trying to do with Janet and Kenneth? What's the matter? What are you laughing at?
Nothing.
What am I so far off the track?
There's nothing going on at all, Rupert.
In both movies, Farley Granger plays a man trapped by another man's obsessive fixation, and Hitchcock turns intellectual flirtation and repressed desire into something unsettling, stylish, and, well, morally toxic. I was originally going to do the podcast about Rope, frankly, but Strangers on a Train is the one I chose. And if that one left me feeling weird, and possibly you too, catch Rope right after you finish Strangers on a Train, because this one will send you to the medicine cabinet. But watch James Stewart's performance, because I contend he was uncomfortable in the role. So you ask me, Jonathan, what's the big deal about this homoerotica theme in these two films? Well, it's not a big deal in the 21st century, but you have to understand both of the films we discussed that struck me as being weird, not because they were homoerotic, but because of a lot of different factors, were produced by the same director and had the same actor, Farley Granger, star in them. That's my point. One of the most interesting aspects of film is the subject of queer cinema. And if you can watch any number of a myriad of documentaries or essays about queer cinema, you're going to learn a lot about film. Because since the early days of film, gays in front of and behind the camera played a huge part. And we wouldn't enjoy the cinema that we have both in the 20th century and the 21st century, but for the amazing contribution of the gay community. So thank you from the Razors Inc. podcast. Until I see you next time, please leave behind a smooth footprint and think twice about accepting that friend request. And class is dismissed.
And just to echo Jonathan's comments about Rope, Jonathan forgot to add the one thing that makes Rope so unforgettable, and that is it was shot in one continuous take. And while others have taken the same approach in recent years, think Birdman from 2014 or the recent Netflix series Adolescence, for instance. One viewing, and you'll see how Rope was far ahead of its time. You've been listening to the Razors Inc. podcast with Jonathan Farini. Be sure to check out Jonathan's collection of fiction at jonathanfarini.com. Also, look for Jonathan's short story, The Blue Binder, in which a tattered blue binder reveals a mind that sees pathways no one else can. The Blue Binder, already published in Infinity Wanderers and Modern Literature, it's been published again, this time by Literary Heist magazine. Look for it at literaryheist.com or at jonathanfarini.com. You can also drop an email anytime to razorsincpodcast@gmail.com.